A Daughter of the Samurai. Chapter 6. A Sunny New Year. Ours was a lonely house the winter after Father's death. The first 49 days when the soul hovers near the eaves was not sad to me, for the constantly burning candles and curling incense of the shrine made me feel that Father was near. And, too, everyone was lovingly busy doing things in the name of the dear one. For, to Buddhists, death is a journey, and during these 7 weeks, Mother and Jia hastened to fulfill neglected duties, to repay obligations of all kinds, and to arrange family affairs so that on the 49th day the soul, freed from world shackles, could go happily on its way to the land of rest. But when the excitement of the busy days was over and, excepting at the time of daily service, the shrine was dark, then came loneliness. In a childish, literal way, I thought of Father as trudging along a peasant road with many other pilgrims, all wearing the white robes covered with priestly writings, the pilgrim hats and straw sandals in which they were buried. And he was getting further and further from me every day. As time passed on, we settled back into the old ways, but it seemed that everybody and everything had changed. Jia no longer hummed old folk songs as he worked, and Ishi's cheerful voice had grown so lifeless that I did not care for fairy tales anymore. Grandmother spent more time than ever polishing the brass furnishings of the shrine. Mother went about her various duties, calm and quiet as usual, but her smile was sad. Sister and I sewed and read together, but we no longer wasted time in giggling and eating sweets, and when in the evening we all gathered around the firebox in Grandmother's room, our conversation was sure to drift to mournful topics. Even in the servants' hall, though talking and laughter still mingled with the sound of spinning and grinding of rice, the spirit of merriment was gone. During these months, my greatest pleasure was going to the temple with Mother or Ishi. Mother's special maid, Toshi, always walked behind carrying flowers for the graves. We went first to the temple to bow our respects to the priest, my much-honoured teacher. He served us tea and cakes and then went with us to the graves. A boy priest going along to carry a whitewood bucket of water with a slender bamboo dipper floating on the top. We made bows to the graves and then, in respect to the dead, poured water from the little dipper over the base of the tall grey stones. So loyal to the past are the people of Nagaoka that, many years after my father's death, I heard my mother say that she had never visited his grave when she had not found it moist with memory pourings of friends and old retainers. On February the 15th, the Enter into Peace celebration of Buddha's death, I went to the temple with Toshi, carrying as a gift to the priest a lacquer box of little dumplings. They were made in all the shapes of the animals in the world to represent the mourners at Buddha's deathbed, where all living creatures were present, except the cat. The good old priest, after expressing his thanks, took a pair of chopsticks and, lifting several of the dumplings onto a plate, placed it for a few minutes in front of the shrine before putting it away for his luncheon. That day he told me with deep feeling that he must say farewell, since he was soon to go away from Chokoji forever. I could not understand then why he should leave the temple where he had been so long and which he loved so dearly. But afterwards I learned that, devout and faithful though he was to all the temple forms, his brain had advanced beyond his faith, and he had joined the army of the few who choose poverty and scorn for the sake of what they believed the truth. One evening, after a heavy snowfall, Grandmother and I were sitting cosily together by the firebox in her room. I was making a hemp thread ball for a mosquito net that was to be woven as part of my sister's wedding dowry, and Grandmother was showing me how to put my fingers deftly through the fuzzy hemp. "Honourable Grandmother," I exclaimed, suddenly recalling something I wanted to say, "I forgot to tell you that we are going to have a snow fight at school tomorrow. Hannah-san is chosen to be leader on one side and I on the other. We are to—" I was so interested that again I lost my thread and it mattered. I gave a quick jerk and at once found myself in sad trouble. "Wait," said Grandmother, reaching out to help me. "You should sing the hemp winding song." As she straightened my tangled thread, her quavery old voice sang, "Watch your hand as it winds hemp thread, if it mats with patient wait, for a thoughtless move or a hasty pull makes smaller tangles great." "Don't forget again," she added, handing back the untangled bunch of hemp. "I was thinking about the snow fight," I said apologetically. Grandmother looked disapproving. "Etsuko," she said, "your eldest sister, before she was married, made enough hemp thread for both the mosquito nets for her destined home. You have now entered your 11th year and should aim to be more maiden-like in your tastes." "Yes, Honourable Grandmother," I replied, feeling with humiliation how true her words were. "This winter I will wind plenty of hemp thread. I will make many balls so Ishi can weave the 2 nets for Sister's dowry before New Year's." "There is no need for such haste," Grandmother replied, smiling at my eagerness, but speaking gravely. "Our days of sorrow must not influence your sister's fate. Her marriage has been postponed until the good luck season, when the rice fields bow with their burden." I had noticed that fewer shopmen had been coming to the house, and I had missed the frequent visits of tall Mr. Nagai and his brisk, talkative little wife, the go-between couple for my sister. So that was what it meant. Our unknown bridegroom would have to wait until autumn for his bride. Sister did not care. There were plenty of things to be interested in, and we both soon forgot all about the delayed wedding in our preparations for the approaching New Year. The first 7 days of the first month were the important holidays of the Japanese year. Men in pleated skirts and crest coats made greeting calls on the families of their friends, where they were received by hostesses in ceremonious garments who entertained them with the most elaborate and special New Year's dishes. Little boys held exciting battles in the sky with wonderful painted kites having knives fastened to their pulling cords. Girls in new sashes tossed gay feathery shuttlecocks back and forth or played poem cards with their brothers and brothers' friends. In the only social gatherings of the year where boys and girls met together, even babies had a part in this holiday time, for each wee one had another birthday on New Year's Day, thus suddenly being ushered into its 2nd year before its first had scarcely begun. Our family festivities that year were few, but our sorrow was not allowed to darken too much the atmosphere of New Year, and for the first time since Father's death, we heard sounds of merriment in the kitchen, with the hot smell of steaming rice and the tong click of mochi pounding were mingled with the voices of Gia and Ishi in the old song, "The Mouse in the House of Plenty," which always accompanies the making of the oldest food of Japan, the rice dough called mochi. "We are the messengers of the good luck god, the merry messengers. We're 100 years old, yet never have heard the fearful cry of cat. For we're the messengers of the good luck god, the merry messengers." About 2 days before New Year, Ishi came into the kitchen looking for me. I was sitting on a mat with Taki, who was here to help for New Year's time, and we were picking out round beans from a pile in a low flat basket. They were the stones of health with which the demons of evil were to be pelted and chased away on New Year's Eve. Gia, in ceremonial dress, would scatter them through the house, closely followed by Taki, Ishi, and Toshi, with sister and Etsubo running after, all vigorously sweeping, pushing, tossing, and throwing, and while the rolling beans went flying across the porches into the garden or onto the walks, our high-pitched voices would merrily sing over and over, "Good luck within! Evil go out! Out!" Ishi had some errands to do, and Mother had said that I might go with her to see the gay sights. How well I remember that wonderful, sunshiny winter day. We crossed the streets on paths cut between walls of frozen snow, only 3 feet deep, for we had but little early snow that winter, and no tunnels were made until after New Year. The sidewalk panels were down in some places, just like summertime, and the shops seemed very light with the sky showing. On each side of every doorway stood a pine tree, and stretched above was a Shinto rope, with its ragged tufts and dangling zigzag papers. Most of the shops on that street were small, with open fronts, and we could plainly see the sloping tiers of shelves laden with all the bright attractions of the season. In front of every shop was a crowd, many of the people having come from nearby villages, for the weather had been unusual, and Nagaoka had hopefully laid in a supply of New Year's goods that would appeal to the simple taste of our country people. To me, many of the sights, familiar though they were, had, in the novelty of their surroundings, the excitement and fascination of a play. At one place where Ishi stopped to get something, I watched a group of 10 or 12-year-old boys, some with babies on their backs, clattering along on their high rainy day clogs. They stopped to buy a candy ball made of puffed rice and black sugar, which they broke, each taking a piece and not forgetting to stuff some scraps in the mouth of the babies that were awake. They were low-class children, of course, to eat on the street, but I could taste the delicious sweet myself as my eyes followed them to the next shop, where they pushed and jostled themselves through a crowd towards a display of large kites painted with dragons and actors' masks that would look truly fearful gazing down from the sky. In some places, young girls were gathered about shops whose shelves held rows of wooden clogs with bright-coloured toe thongs, or where, beneath low eaves, swung long straw cones stuck full of New Year hairpins, gay with pine leaves and plum blossoms. There were, of course, many shops which sold painted battledores and long split sticks holding rows of 5 to 10 feathery shuttlecocks of all colours. The biggest crowds of all were in front of these shops, for nobody was too poor or too busy to play hane on New Year's days. That was a wonderful walk, and I've always been glad I took it, for it was the only time I remember of my childhood when we had sunshiny streets at New Year time. Notwithstanding our quiet house, the first 3 days of the New Year, Mother was pretty busy receiving calls from our men, kinsfolk and family friends. They were entertained with every vegetable soup, with miso stuffed salmon, fried bean curd, seaweed of a certain kind, and frozen gelatin. Mochi, as a matter of course, was in everything, for mochi meant happy congratulations, and was indispensable to every house during New Year's holidays. With the food was served a rice wine called tosusaki, which was rarely used except on certain natal occasions, and at New Year's time. Toso means fountain of youth, and its significance is that with the new year a new life begins. The following days were more informal. Old retainers and old servants called to pay respect, and always on one day during the season, Mother entertained all the servants of the house. They would gather in the large living room, dressed in their best clothes. Then little lacquer tables with our dishes laden with New Year's dainties were brought in, and the rice served by Sister and myself. Even Mother helped. There were Taki, Ishi, Toshi and Kin, with Gia and 2 man-servants, and all behaved with great ceremony. Kin, who had a merry heart, would sometimes make fun for all by rather timidly imitating Mother's stately manner. Mother always smiled with dignified good nature, but Sister and I had to quench our merriment, for we were endeavouring to emulate Kin and Toshi in our deep bows and respectful manners. It was all very formally informal and most delightful. On those occasions, Mother sometimes invited a carpenter, an old man who was always treated in our family as a sort of minor retainer. In old Japan, a good carpenter included the profession of architect, designer, and interior decorator as well as of worker in wood. And since this man was known in Nagaoka as Master Goro Beam, the complimentary title of an exceptionally clever and skillful master carpenter, and in addition was the descendant of several generations of his name, he was much respected. I was very fond of Goro. He had won my heart by making for me a beautiful little dollhouse with a ladder-like stairway. It was my heart's pride during all the paper doll years of my life. On the first New Year's Day that Goro came, after Father's death, he seemed quiet and sad until Mother had served him tososake. Then he brightened up and grew talkative. In the midst of the feast, he suddenly paused and, lifting his tososake cup very respectfully to the level of his forehead, he bowed politely to Mother, who was sitting on her cushion just within the open doorway of the next room. "Honourable Mistress," he began, "when your gateway had the pine decoration the last time, and you graciously entertained me like this, my honourable master was here." "Yes, so he was," Master replied with a sad smile. "Things have changed, Goro." "Honourable master ever possessed wit," Goro went on. "No ill health or ill fortune could dull his brain or his tongue. It was in the midst of your gracious hospitality, honourable mistress, that honourable master entered the room and assured us all that we were received with agreeable welcome. I had composed a humble poem of the kind that calls for reply to make it complete, and was so bold as to repeat it to honourable master with the request that he honour me with closing words. My poem, as suitable for a New Year greeting, was a wish for good luck, good health, and goodwill to this honourable mansion. The good fortune gods encircle this house with safety-locked hands, and nothing can pass them by. Then, honourable master," and Goro deeply bowed, with a wrinkle of fun on his lips and a twinkle of fun in his eyes, replied as quickly as a flash of light, "Alas and alas, then from this house the god of poverty can never escape, but must always stay within." Goro enjoyed his joke poems so much that Mother united her gentle smile with the gay laughter of his companions, who were always ready to applaud any words spoken in praise of the master they had all loved and revered. But bright-eyed Kin whispered to Ishi, and Ishi smiled and nodded. Then Taki and Toshi caught some words, and they too smiled. Not until afterward did I know that Kin's whisper was, "The gods of poverty are sometimes kind. They've locked their hands with the good luck gods and prisoned joy within our gates." Thus lived the spirit of democracy in old Japan. Chapter 7. The Wedding That Never Was. The pleasant days of New Year barely lasted through the holidays. We usually left the mochi cakes on the tokonoma until the 15th, but it was everywhere the custom to remove the pines from the gateways on the morning of the 8th day. There was a tradition, which nobody believed, however, that during the 7th night the trees sink into the earth, leaving only the tips visible above the ground. Literally, this was true that year, for when we wakened on the morning of the 8th, I found the 3-foot paths filled with our whole garden, a level land of snow about 4 feet deep. Our low pines at the gateway were snowed under, and we saw nothing more of them until spring. Every unskilled worker in Nagaoka was busy that day, for the snow was unexpected and heavy. More followed, and in a few weeks we children were going to school beneath covered sidewalks and through snow tunnels, and our beautiful new year was only a sunshiny memory. One afternoon, I was coming home from school. A postman in his straw coat and big straw snowshoes came slipping down through a tunnel opening from the snowy plain above. "Ma, little mistress," he called gaily when he saw me, "I have mail from your house from America." "From America?" I exclaimed, greatly surprised, for a letter from a foreign land had never come to us before. It was an exciting event. I tried to keep the postman in sight as he hurried along the narrow walk between the snow wall and the row of open front shops. Occasionally he would call out, a message," and stop to put mail into an outstretched hand. The path was narrow and I frequently was jostled by passing people, but I was not far behind the postman when he turned into our street. I knew he would go to the side entrance with the mail, so I hurried very fast, and I had reached grandmother's room and already made my bow of "I have come back" before a maid entered with the mail. The wonderful letter was for Mother, and grandmother asked me to carry it to her. My heart sank with disappointment, for my chance to see it opened was gone. I knew that as soon as my mother received it, she would take it at once to grandmother, but I should not be there. Then grandmother would look at it very carefully through her big horn spectacles and hand it back to mother, saying in a slow and ceremonious manner, "Please open." Of course, she would be agitated because it was a foreign letter, but that would only make her still more slow and ceremonious. I could see the whole picture in my mind as I walked through the hall, carrying the big odd-shaped envelope to Mother's room. That evening, after family service before the shrine, grandmother kept her head bowed longer than usual. When she raised it, she sat up very straight and announced solemnly, with most of the formal dignity, almost like a temple service, that the young master who had been in America for several years was to return to his home. This was startling news, for my brother had been gone almost since I could remember, and his name was never mentioned. To call him young master was sufficient explanation that the unknown tragedy was past, and he reinstated in his position as a son. The servants, sitting in the rear of the room, bowed to the floor in silent congratulation, but they seemed to be struggling with suppressed excitement. I did not stop to wonder why. It was enough for me to know that my brother was coming home. I could scarcely hold the joy in my heart. I must have been very young when my brother went away, for though I could distinctly recall the day he left, all memory of what went before or came immediately after was dim. I remember a sunny morning when our house was decorated with wondrous beauty, and the servants all wore ceremonial dress with the inagaki crest. It was the day of my brother's marriage. In the tokonoma of our best room was one of our treasures, a triple roll picture of pine, bamboo, and plum, painted by an ancient artist. On the platform beneath was the beautiful takasago table, where the white-haired old couple with rake and broom were gathering pine needles on the shore. Other emblems of happily married life were everywhere, for each gift, and there were whole rooms full. was decorated with small figures of snowy storks, of gold-brown tortoises, or beautiful sprays of entwined pine, bamboo, and plum. 2 new rooms, which had recently been built, were full of beautiful lacquer toilet cases and whitewood chests with iron clasps. They had come the day before in a procession of immense trays swinging from poles on the shoulders of unskilled workers. Each was covered with a cloth bearing a crest, not ours. Ishi and I wandered from room to room, she explaining that the bride for the young master would soon be there. She allowed me one peep into the wedding room. It was all white and plain and empty, except for the offerings to the gods on the tokonoma, and the little table with 3 red cups for the sacred promise. Ishi was continually running to look out toward the big entrance gate, and of course, wherever she went, I was close by, holding to her sleeve. The whole house was open. The sliding doors of every room were pushed back, and we could see clear into the big open gateway at the end of the stone walk. Just beneath its narrow thatch was looped a dark blue curtain bearing the Inagaki crest, and on each side were tall, slender stands holding lanterns of congratulation. Near one of the stone posts was the 7.5 times messenger in his stiff-sleeved garment. He had returned from his 7th trip to see if the bridal procession was coming, and though the day was bright with sunshine, he was just lighting his big lantern for his last trip to meet it halfway, thus showing our eagerness to welcome the coming bride. Presently Ishi said that the procession was almost here, and I saw the servants hurrying toward the entrance, all smiling, but moving with such respectful quiet that I could hear plainly the creaking of the bride's palanquin and the soft thud of the Jurenkisha's men's feet as they came up the hill. Then suddenly something was wrong. Ishi caught my shoulder and pulled me back, and brother came hurriedly out of father's room. He passed us with long, swinging strides, never looking at me at all, and stepping into his shoes on the garden step, he walked rapidly towards the side entrance. I had never seen him after that day. The maiden my brother was to have married did not return to her former home. Having left it to become a bride, she was legally no longer a member of her father's family. This unusual problem mother solved by inviting her to remain in our home as a daughter, which she did until finally mother arranged a good marriage for her. In a childish way, I wondered about all the strangeness, but years had passed before I connected it with the sudden going away at this time of a graceful little maid named Tama, who used to arrange flowers and perform light duties. Her merry laugh and ready tongue made her a favourite with the entire household. Tama was not a servant. In those days it was the custom for daughters of wealthy tradesmen to be sent to live for a short time in a house of rank, that the maiden might learn the strict etiquette of a samurai home life. This position was far from menial. A girl living with a family for social education was always treated with respectful consideration. The morning after my brother went away, I was going as usual to pay my morning greeting to my father when I met Tama coming from his door, looking pale and startled. She bowed good morning to me and then passed quietly on. That afternoon I missed her, and Ishi told me that she had gone home. Whatever may have been between my brother and Tama, I never knew, but I cannot but feel that guilt or innocence, there was somewhere a trace of courage. My brother was weak, of course, to prolong his heart struggle until almost the last moment, but he must have had much of his father's strong character to enable him even then to break with traditions of his rigid training and defy his father's command. In that day there could be only a hopeless ending to such an affair, for no marriage was legal without the consent of parents, and my father, with heart wounded and pride shamed, had declared that he had no son. It was not until several years later when I heard again of my brother. One afternoon, Father was showing me some twisting tricks with a string. I was kneeling close beside his cushion, watching his rapidly moving hands and trying to catch his fingers in my own. Mother was sitting near with her sewing, and all three of us were laughing. A maid came to the door to say that Major Sato, a Tokyo gentleman whom my father knew very well, had called. I slipped back by Mother. She started to leave the room, but Father motioned her not to go, and so we both remained. I shall never forget that scene. Major Sato, speaking with great earnestness, told how my brother had gone to Tokyo and entered the Army College. With only his own efforts, he had completed the course with honour and was now a lieutenant. There, Major Sato paused. My father sat very still with his head held high and absolutely no expression on his stern face. For a full minute the room was so silent that I could hear myself breathe. Then my father, still without moving, asked quietly, "Is this your message delivered, Major Sato?" "It is finished," was the reply. "Your interest is appreciated, Major Sato. This is my answer. I have daughters, but no son." Mother had sat perfectly quiet throughout, with her head bowed and her hands tightly clasped in her lap. When Father spoke, she gave a little shudder, but did not move. Presently, Father turned towards her. "Wife," he said very gently, "ask Ishi to bring the go-board and send wine to the honourable guest." Whatever was in the heart of either man, they calmly played the game to the end, and Mother and I sat there in the deep silence as motionless as statues. That night, when Ishi was helping me undress, I saw tears in her eyes. "What troubles you, Ishi?" I asked. "Why do you almost cry?" She sank to her knees, burying her face in her sleeves, and for the only time in my life I heard Ishi wail like a servant. "Oh, little mistress," she sobbed. "I am not sad, I am glad. I am thankful to the gods that I am lowly born and can cry when my heart is filled with ache, and can laugh when my heart sings. Oh, my dear, dear mistress, my poor, poor master," and still she sobbed. That was all a long time ago, and now, after many years, my brother was coming back to his home. The snow went away, the spring passed, and summer was with us. It seemed a long, long wait, but at last came a day when the shrine doors were opened early in the morning and the candles kept burning steadily hour after hour, for Grandmother wanted the presence of the ancestors in the welcome to the wanderer, and as the trip from Tokyo was by jinrikisha and kago in those days, the time of arrival was very uncertain. But at last the call, "Honourable return," at the gateway brought everyone except Grandmother to the entrance. We all bowed our faces to the floor, but nevertheless I saw a man in foreign dress jump from his jinrikisha, give a quick look around, and then walk slowly up the old stone path towards us. He stopped at one place and smiled as he pulled a tuft of the little blossoms growing beneath the stones, but he threw it away once and came on. The greetings at the door were very short. Brother and Mother bowed, he speaking gently to her and she looking at him with a smile that had tears close behind. Then he laughingly called me the same curly-haired, round-faced Etsuko. His foreign shoes were removed by Gia, and we went in. Of course, he went to the shrine first. He bowed and did everything just right, but too quickly, and some way I felt troubled. Then he went to visit Grandmother. Immediately after greetings were over, Grandmother handed him Father's lacquer letterbox. He lifted it to his forehead with formal courtesy, then, taking out the letter, he slowly unrolled it, and with strange expression sat looking at the writing. I was shocked to feel that I could not know whether that look meant bitterness or amusement or hopelessness. It seemed to be a combination of all three. The message was very short. In a trembling hand was written, "You are now the head of Inagaki. My son, I trust you." That was all. That evening, a grand dinner was served in our best room. Brother sat next to the tokonoma. At the next, relatives were there, and we had the kind of food Brother used to like. There was a great deal of talking, but he was rather quiet, although he told us some things about America. I watched him as he talked. His strange dress with tight sleeves and his black stockings suggested kitchen people, and he sat cross-legged on his cushion. His voice was rather loud, and he had a quick way of looking from one person to another that was almost startling. I felt a little troubled and uncertain, almost disappointed, for in some puzzling way he was different from what I wanted him to be. But one thing I loved at once. He had the same soft twinkle in his eyes when he smiled that Father had. Every time I saw that, I felt that however different from Father he might look or be, he really had the lovable part of Father in his heart, and in spite of a vague fear, I knew deep, deep down that whatever may happen, in the days or years to come, I should always love him and should always be true to him. And I always have. End of part 4. If you are enjoying our audiobooks, please take the time to subscribe, press like, make a comment, or share this audiobook station with other friends who also enjoy listening. Thank you.